At the end of the Second World War, large scale war crimes trials were being planned, and the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, also known as the Tokyo Trial, 28 Japanese military and political leaders were charged with 55 separate counts. Surprising to many, the Emperor of Japan, uh, called Hirohito, was not one of them. This led to many questions. The emperor was supposedly the supreme leader of all of Japan. How could he not be responsible for the actions of the military that he supposedly had control of? During this speech, I will inform you about the life of the man known as Hirohito, and why even today scholars are split onto whether or not he was responsible for the war crimes committed by the Japanese military. First, let's talk about the emperor's early life. In his early life, he was born 29th of April 1901. It was during his grandfather's reign. He was the Emperor Meiji, and his father was the 21-year-old Crown Prince Yoshihito, the future Emperor Taisho. In Japan, usually once a reign is taken, emperorship is taken, they change their name, get a symbolic name. When his grandfather died in 1912, when he was around 11, his father ascended to the throne and he became the crown prince. He was immediately commissioned in both the Japanese Army and Navy, though it was generally a ceremonial role. As he went throughout his life, even into his reign as emperor, he continued to rise throughout the ranks. Though yet again, he never served in any actual capacity. Uh, Another big part of his early life was in 1921 when he traveled across Europe, which was seen as rather scandalous in most of Japanese society at the time. After returning to Japan, he became regent for his father, for his father had started down a decline, mainly due to mental illness. He got married to his distant cousin in 1924. It was an arranged marriage, and after his father died in 1926, he did ascend to the throne. Um, Now, that was just his early life, but what really sticks with his memory are the wars that he presided over. First, there was the Second Sino Japanese War, and more importantly to our topic, there was the World War II. It would take a whole other speech, and probably not one that would be very PG, to go over the various atrocities committed during World War II by the Japanese military. Um, so I won't go into them here. Uh, but they were numerous enough and severe enough that there was plenty of argument over who should take responsibility for it. The main argument that people usually make when talking about whether Emperor Hirohito should be considered responsible for those crimes are that he was officially given power to control the entire military by the imperial constitution. The actual constitution of the country did give him full and total power over the military. There's also recorded evidence, or of some sort, that poison gas weapons were authorized for use by him. Um, so that itself is considered a war crime, and there were a lot of a problem. There were definitely a lot of problems with that. Arguments against Hirohito having responsibility generally refer to the fact that the emperor at the time was generally seen as a rubber stamp. Usually, he just agreed to things, and was just sort of it was almost more ritual after all his supposed inferiors had decided on a solution. They would bring it to the emperor, and he would just agree with it. Uh, so those are generally the two sides of the story. But after the war, his life kind of changed rather dramatically. In his post-war reign, the U.S. had installed a temporary government, which had pretty strongly defended Hirohito. They outlawed they made it illegal to speak out against Hirohito and talk about his possible blame for the actions during the war. and its leader, General MacArthur, generally was known to see the emperor as a useful ally more than anything. So he specifically worked towards keeping him in power. Hirohito became a very active figure after the war. He and his family had a strong public presence, very similar to the modern day English royal family. Did a lot of activities with them out in the open, and he often traveled abroad to visit foreign leaders. There was there was a very high profile visit with Eisenhower when he was president. I believe they played golf together. Then, much later down the line, he died. It was September 22nd, 1987. And that was generally when it finally became okay in Japanese society to actually discuss the topic of whether or not he was actually responsible for some of the war crimes. Um, in conclusion, Hirohito was an interesting man who was the head of Japan during some of its bloodiest moments. He had a comfortable youth and took over as emperor at a young age. The arguments over his involvement in the war crimes committed by the Japanese army generally come down to how much actual control he had over the military. The question still is whether the man was just a rubber stamp or if he actively made some decisions besides some of the worst atrocities of the war. Thank you.